Friends, as I begin today, I want to start by acknowledging the passing of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a New Yorker, a wife, a mother, the first Jewish woman appointed to uphold the highest laws of our nation. Justice Ginsburg knew how great America could be. She knew the greatness that must be shared with more and more people. She was a champion for people on the margins, and she welcomed many to share in the greatness of humanity's promise, particularly extending constitutional protection and human dignity to women and people of color, LGBTQ folk, children, and millions upon tens of millions of others. She was a hero, a patriot, a leader of uncompromised faith and values. She will be missed. Her lace collar is impossible to fill. Please join me in silent remembrance of this child of God who lived a life of service, humility, justice, and love. Amen. It is a truth universally known among clergy that complaining is part of what brings us together as people of faith. Congregations complain. It's been the nature of faithful assemblies of people from the time of Moses onward. Complaining, or how we like to talk about it in church, lamenting, lest any of you should feel compelled to complain about my use of the word complaining. We hope to note our dissatisfaction with the way of the world is now, and we come to pray for a divine correction. Lamenting the state of ourselves or of our nation or of our time, we come together as a people of faith to keep watch and to spread hope. Complaining has its purposes, but of course it can also be really unpleasant against the person at which it's lobbied. I'll let you in on a secret. Often when clergy get together, we wind up complaining about whatever our congregations are complaining about. And trust me when I tell you that there's far more that unites us than divides us. Thick skin is required for leading people interested in change, and change is at the very heart of why we come together as a congregation. We want to see the world to be changed, to be more like what we imagine God intended. We want to change the face of hunger in our city and change who has access to voting and change the course of oppression and hatred and change it all into acceptance and love. We want the arc of history to bend and to change to justice more quickly. We want our sorrow changed into rejoicing. We want our voices heard by both God and country. And on the other hand, there are some things among the congregation that we do not ever want to change. And we complain to our clergy about these things too. New hymns or changes to the music program tend to always top the list. My female colleagues in ministry tell me they often dread a haircut because they know that doing so will elicit any number of unprompted comments in coffee hour. Change over the little things or the big things. Change is hard. We believe that God changes all that we want and nothing that we don't want. And we complain when God seems to get confused about what we think should and should not change. When it comes to congregations, Moses and Aaron were not as lucky as Bridget, Sam, and me. Moses and Aaron led, in God's own words, a stiff-necked people who had many a complaint. And in the part of the story we hear today, the congregation of Israel is hungry. They're probably also tired and they don't like the accommodations. They have questions about the hymn book, don't want to keep walking, and they're really, really beginning to wonder why it is they left what somehow rose-colored glasses now remember as the comfort of slavery in Israel. This was Moses and Aaron's fault, of course, and the whole congregation complained against them. And even the thickest, the most seasoned of leaders like Moses, a poor old guy that he was, he must have felt a bit beaten down by the whole congregation turning against him. Happily, I can empathize with Moses, but I can't sympathize. And I'm looking to each of you to help keep it that way. Here, Moses does what we people of faith have an opportunity to do when oppressed. He turns the problem over to God. And he says, God, they're complaining against you, not me. You've got to fix this. Moses comes to God, turning complaint into petition. And God makes a promise to Moses that there will be bread in the morning and quail in the evening. All will be fed. The people will not starve. This is a holy promise, a promise to take care of the very base of our human needs. When the whole congregation of Israel seemed to forget their history, God gave them food as a promise that God would take care of them. God also gave them food as a reminder that it was God, the Lord, who brought them out of the land of Egypt. Food is not just sustenance for the body, but it is a reminder for the spirit, and it is love for the heart. Any of you who have taken to cooking more meals or more often than you used to, for more people at home than you used to, you may know this. And any of you non-cooks out there, well, you might know this even more. There's something holy in how we feed and how we are fed. Food is a promise of care for the living of this day. God the chef, the early morning baker, the evening grill master, promises food as both nurture and reminder. At West End, food has been the heart of our justice work for many decades. What was Soup Kitchen, what became Taste of Heaven, what is growing and expanding and changing again even now, is our commitment to feeding people like God does, with both physical and spiritual sustenance. Our food programs at West End center themselves around one word: dignity. The dignity that comes when one human being is able to look another human being square in the eye and meet the needs of hunger, to feed and to be fed, in body or in spirit, in generosity, in need. It is human. We are hungry. We are able to feed. We ground ourselves in this dignity that is a promise of God, and we do so much more than provide a meal. We share a promise. On Tuesdays on the streets, our Meals to Go program is the evolution of Taste of Heaven brought about by the pandemic. At the moment, these nutritionally dense bags of sandwiches, milk, snacks, each bag offers about 1,000 calories for anyone who needs one. Food for all, that's the motto. No judgments, no preaching, no shame, just food. Just food. But it's so much more than the snacks in the bag. It's food that has been made and assembled by loving volunteer hands. Food that is placed into the hands of the recipient by a volunteer who looks you in the eye and has several minutes to hear the story of your day and to talk to you. Food for all, just down the street on Broadway and in front of the church, every Tuesday from 4 to 5 o'clock. That's been our promise since May. We intend to keep this promise until we adapt again to meet the needs in whatever changing reality or weather or conditions we may face in the coming year. In addition to Meals to Go, we are also 2 weeks into a new program and a new partnership for our city. Owing in large part to the enormous efforts of Elizabeth and Nathan Stillwell, of Andrea Steinkamp, of others of you, and of new community partners, West End now has a community fridge. Maybe you've seen it, or maybe you've just heard about it the past 2 weeks. On the front porch of the church, as you walk up the steps to the 245 entrance, there is now a refrigerator, stocked with food by neighborhood folks who have a little extra, and available to anyone who needs a little more. Anyone. It's a neighborhood fridge for all people. Leave an onion, take a yogurt. It's an excellent idea, the meat and potatoes of our ministry. You carrot beat it. Let us give thanks and pray. And while our building remains largely closed, the West End fridge is very much open. Monday through Friday, from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., the West End fridge extends a radical welcome to a neighborhood in need, to our people, friends, and neighbors who are hungry or displaced in the wilderness of our own time. The fridge has a quiet sort of dignity, the sort of dignity that comes like bread in the morning or quail in the evening. It's not out there in the middle of everything, but there's a bit of privacy for those who visit it. It's like a late night snack when everyone else is asleep. It offers a personal moment of communion. No need to feel embarrassed or ashamed about taking a meal or leaving a meal. The fridge is for everyone. In tomorrow's e-blast will be more information about how we can all work on the promise of God to provide food for God's people. Sam is the pastoral lead for our food justice programs, and if you want to get more involved, email him or talk to Andrea or Elizabeth or Nathan or Marilyn or Susan or Bridget. So many of us are joining together. You all are welcome. These two programs, as they are right now, are just a beginning. Quick responses, triage, in the time of pandemic times that will grow into even more opportunities to minister, as God did for the Israelites, with both food and kindness. There are more ways, many more opportunities, and more dignity coming for more people very soon. That's a promise I can make. And you know, it's nice talking to you about food this Sunday after Rosh Hashanah. In the midst of the days of awe, I need more awe in my days, don't you? Days when God's faithful chosen people journey from earthly celebrations all the way to the gates of heaven and back again. Maybe some of you celebrated a Rosh Hashanah Shabbat meal this past Friday. If you did, or maybe you've done it in the past, you know the dignity of God's promise as expressed in that feast. If you were listening into the children's message earlier, you know that apples and honey are customary treats for the occasion, better than bread and quail for many accounts, and they symbolize the sweetness and the goodness for the coming new year. I have a bit of holy envy for the way our Jewish siblings celebrate holidays, beginning with the weekly ritual of Friday night Shabbats, around tables, lighting candles, saying blessings, and sinking into carefully, prayerfully prepared meals. And while we Christians certainly have big meals around our own big holidays as well, at least in my house growing up, they were always a little bit more catch as catch can, but there's something so special about the preparation and the care that comes in Jewish celebrations that feels particularly holy to me. It's probably why I'm such a sacramentalist. Communion is one of my favorite parts of church. Food is always a sign of promise, of God's promise for us and of our promises for each other too. God gives manna in the wilderness and reminds the Israelites, complaining as they are, that God is still doing, has done, and will always do marvelous things. Jesus gives bread and wine to friends on the night of another Jewish holiday as a promise that he will always be with them. We feed each other. Mothers nurse their babies, fathers who cook weeknight suppers and portion out blueberries on children's plates, helpers who make sandwiches, and others who give bags of food out on the street, neighbors who stock a fridge so that other neighbors can stock theirs. Feeding is a holy, holy promise, a contract between I and thou that says we are God's people, people united far more in our common hunger than by whatever earthly distinctions we think may divide us. We can be fed. We can feed, Jew or Gentile, of whatever gender or expression, however we are each free, however each of us may be enslaved. God's holy promise is for all of us, all people. It is a promise of dignity, a promise of justice, a promise that is remembered and a covenant that is kept. For in God, all will be fed and all will have enough. How? Both by grace and also by each of us. Each of us who can feed and be fed. Each of us who can do what we can do. Each of us being the helping hands, making a sandwich, stocking a fridge, handing something out, lending an ear, giving time if we have nothing more to offer, instilling dignity, offering humanity. This is how we may be the helping hands of a God who is always faithful to the holy promises made for each generation. In our darkest times, in the wildernesses of our own lives, when traveling between this place and places still unknown, God keeps God's promises. When we are hungry, God feeds us. When we starve for justice, God sustains us. When we thirst for mercy, God opens the hardest rocks of the driest places of our hearts and flows forth with living water. We come to be filled, and God promises enough for all, more than enough for each. Thanks be to God. Amen.